I've done a few videos lately where I've discussed my coal forge setup. People had asked me about my hood and my chimney, and that prompted questions about the forge itself and the fire pot and the blower. So I did a video on that. Now that has prompted questions about the pros and cons of one type of forge versus the other type of forge, or several other types of forges, as it really is. So I'm going to see if I can talk a little bit today about the pros and cons of various types of forges. And mostly I'm going to be discussing fuel source as opposed to construction details. There are so many different details, burner types, blown gas forges versus aspirated gas forges, with high-tech burners, with low-tech burners, with this insulation, with that insulation, with doors, without doors, with preheaters, without preheaters. I just can't even keep track of it myself, and I'm not an expert on that, so I won't really discuss all of the variations in forge styles. And the same goes for solid fuel forges like a coal forge, because there's bottom blast, side blast, there's riveters forges, there's brake drum forges, there's trench forges dug in the yard with simple blowers. There's all sorts of primitive other options out there, and sometime I would really like to cover all that, but it may take a month-long tour to various people's shops to see what other people have, and right now that's not in my timeline. I just don't have the time to do that. It'd be a lot of fun though, because it'd give me an excuse to go visit a lot of different blacksmiths in the area, and maybe even travel further just to see their forges. That would be an epic adventure as far as I'm concerned, but not going to happen today. So we're just going to talk about pros and cons. And we're going to talk about the environmental issues, the social issues, the romantic issues, the economic issues, because yes, those things are all real considerations when you're looking to buy a forge. But first, let's talk about the practical issues, because that's really what it should come down to. It's not what it really comes down to in the end, but let's talk practicality first. This is an electric resistance kiln or oven or furnace, however you want to call it. It is one that was meant for burning out ceramic flasks for lost wax casting. It gets things hot. It's great for heat treating because it's very exact, very precise. And while you could achieve forging temperatures in it, it would be agonizingly slow. It might take you an hour to bring a piece up to forging heat, take it to the anvil, work on it, put it back in here for another hour. Terrible as a forge. I would never even consider using electric resistance as a source for forge heat. However, electric induction heat is extremely efficient. I have never used an induction forge. I can't show you one. I can't tell you exactly how good they are. I would love to try one out, so if you're a dealer of induction forges and want me to do a free review for you, I'd be happy to take one off your hands. Okay, that's not going to happen. But anyways, electric induction forges have real possibility. They heat very quickly, very precisely. I suspect they have limitations, specifically in size. You need an induction coil that fits the work you're working on. But I think if you can design and make your own coils, which most people do, you can adapt to a lot of different kinds of work. I suspect you can forge weld in one, but I've never actually talked to anybody that has, so I don't know that for sure. But electricity is a possibility as a forge fuel. Very few people use it. Industry is using electricity more and more. Our local steel mill no longer burns coal. They use electric induction processes for all of their work. So it's a viable thing for the future. I just don't know that it's the thing for the small home shop right now. It's rather pricey and rather high-tech and would be easily damaged, and I know I would ruin one. But I'd like to try it anyways. So electricity is a possibility for forge fuel. But what we're really talking about probably are gas forges and solid fuel forges. Those are the ones that most of us are going to have access to, or we're going to be able to build ourselves with the technology that many of us have in our shops. So we'll talk about the gas forge because it's sitting here right on top. One of the big pluses to a gas forge, I'll talk about the pros and I'll talk about some of the cons, is that it's super easy to light. That's it. A gas forge lights very easily. A gas forge is also very clean. It does not impart any impurities into your work, whereas coal can certainly do that. A gas forge, you don't come in at the end of the day just filthy, covered in coal dust. You don't blow your nose and get coal dust out of your sinuses, which is quite real. When you scratch your head after working with a coal forge, you rain coal dust all over the place. Gas forge is very clean. Keeps your shop clean, keeps you clean, keeps your work clean. A gas forge has the advantage that you can put 3, 4, 5, I sometimes have had more than a dozen pieces in a gas forge doing production runs, and it's not going to overheat them. It's not going to burn them up. You can set the heat, be assured that nothing's going to get any hotter than that. You can go forge a piece, come back, the next piece is hot, ready to go. You replace the first piece. By the time you get to the end of the run that you've got in there, the one you replaced is hot again, and you can work almost indefinitely that way. Very good for production work. And that's one reason I use a gas forge so much, is I do a lot of small production runs. And having that ability that I don't have to worry about destroying anything, don't have to concentrate on fire maintenance. I can concentrate on forging and don't worry about working a fire. A gas forge is excellent for that. A gas forge does not require a chimney or a hood in most cases. Depending on your local codes, they might require that if they're going to come inspect you, but most blacksmith shops don't worry about it. They're airy enough, drafty enough, and you can get by with a gas forge inside as long as it's running properly. And it would be a good idea to have a low oxygen sensor and a carbon monoxide sensor in your shop to make sure that these things are running properly, and or have a hood over the top of it so it vents the heat out. Another advantage of the gas forge this time of year is it puts out a lot of heat. This thing just really warms up this area of the shop. It's better than most furnaces would be right around the forge area. And in the winter, when it's cold outside, a gas forge is a delight to work around. And another advantage is they're easy to come by. There are lots of people making gas forges out there today. You can go online, you can buy these. They're small enough, light enough, they can ship them UPS. There are lots of instructions out there on how to build your own, lots of different options, different sizes. They're just very available. And if you're just getting started, this is a very good forge to get started in. It's got a lot less effort to start with one of these, and you can concentrate on learning to forge more than concentrating on learning to maintain a fire. So gas forges are wonderful for that stuff. It's portable. This one's heavy, and I wouldn't pick it up now that it's been running because it's going to be too hot to pick up right away. But it's something that I can load up in the back of the car, and I can take to somebody else's shop if I need to. If we're having a workshop and we need more forges, I can take this. I can take a small propane tank with me, and I can work in it. And it's not limited to propane. You can get gas forges that will run on natural gas, and that's a possibility. Natural gas is almost always lower pressure than what we run most of these on, but forges can be designed to run on the low pressure natural gas, or if you have industrial natural gas, it can be run at a higher pressure. All those things are possible. I believe it's even possible to run these on diesel fuel or biodiesel. It has to be a specially designed forge that has a fuel pump and some sort of atomizer or vaporizing system to give you something that you can burn and not just squirt diesel fuel into the forge. But I have heard of people doing that, and waste oil forges. So those are all possibilities kind of around the gas forge general concept. I have no idea how you build some of those oil burning forges, so I'm not the one to ask. You'll have to hunt those down on your own if you're interested in exploring that, and try to be safe, because I can see those being a bigger problem than gas forges could be. What are the cons to a gas forge? What's the downside? Well, the one downside, and the reason that I sometimes don't like this particular forge, I said it was a delight to work around in the winter. It is a misery to work around in the summer. This thing puts out so much heat. If it's 80 degrees outside, it can be 120 degrees in the shop, even with all the doors open and a fan blowing. It is just a huge amount of heat comes off of this thing in the summer. The flame front can come clear out to here. There are ways to deal with that, and we may cover that in another video. But the heat is the main reason I don't like a gas forge in the summertime. And even today, it was not all that cold out, and it was kind of hot in here. It's a good idea to close the chokes if you have adjustable chokes on your gas forge so the heat doesn't damage your burner tips. Another disadvantage to a gas forge is the shape of the opening. If you're working big, odd shapes, this thing may not fit in the opening. Actually, that one will, just barely. But trying to do a corner for a big framework, you're never going to get both pieces in there. After you weld that corner up, it's not going to fit through that door. You might be able to get a gas forge designed to do that, but then you start getting into a situation where you need 2, 3, 4, 5 gas forges so that you have one for every possibility. So they are not absolutely versatile. Gas forges sometimes don't really want to get up to welding heat. That can be a real problem in some low-end gas forges. Most of the commercial ones that are being made now will reach welding heat, at least at sea level. If you get too high in altitude, it starts getting hard for them to bring in enough oxygen to achieve welding heat reliably, and that can be a little bit of a problem. The other problem is that the inside of these things, and this one you can just see all sorts of loose junk if you look close. Yep. I guess I won't worry about fishing it out, but the welding flux destroys the forge lining. You have to have sacrificial material in there and keep changing it, or you destroy the floor of your forge, you burn all the way through it, you have to replace and rebuild the forge more often. Gas forges, one way or the other, you're going to have to reline eventually. I had one that I really liked. It was a super efficient forge, didn't put out this much heat into the shop, kept it all in the forge, but it was very fragile. And when I went full time, I found that I was having to reline that forge way too often, and I just gave up on it because it was not working for me. This one's more durable. This is a Chile forge, commercially made. You can go online, you can buy these, and they make them in several different sizes, and they sell you the burners if you want to build your own forge. So that's some of the pros and cons of a gas forge from a practicality issue. Like I say, we're going to talk about the social economic issues here in just a little bit on all of these forges, but we'll stick with practicality. So the next thing to look at is the coal forge. So the coal forge, that's kind of the classic forge most of us think of when we think of blacksmithing. We see the coal fire, the open hearth, and it's what we are somewhat attracted to as blacksmiths. What are the advantages of the coal fire? Well, the number one advantage from my point of view is it's open. I can put odd shaped things in here. We talked about doing a big frame with a corner weld. If I needed to reheat that corner to adjust it after the weld was made, I can get a whole big frame in here. It's dictated by my length here and my width here, and this is open enough that I could get a 4-foot square frame or bigger in here and still be able to get it out and get it to the anvil. If you're doing wagon wheels, you can get a wagon wheel in here, full 4-foot loop of a 3-inch wide wagon wheel you can bring up to welding heat to weld the joint to make a tire for a wagon. That's possible in a coal forge. Coal forge is capable of very small heats. If you're doing little delicate forge welds, you can do that in a coal forge, whereas the gas forge can be awfully harsh on those little welds. So lots of versatility. A coal forge will do just about anything you ever need to do in a typical blacksmith shop. If you're doing specialized stuff like making anvils, obviously you need something different than this kind of a forge. But for most blacksmiths making ornamental work, making knives, making axes, making tools, making pokers and bottle openers for the local craft fair, doing house jewelry, light fixtures, things like that. You can do all of that in a coal forge. It's got lots of options. You can build different size fires in it. And you can, I say coal, you can burn coke, and you can burn charcoal, and you can even burn wood. It turns to charcoal just like coal turns to coke. Wood will turn to charcoal. But if all you got is lump wood, you can actually make that work. I wouldn't do it as a matter of everyday procedure, but you could do it. And somebody commented on one of my earlier forge videos that they'd seen something about burning feed corn. Haven't tried it. I don't know much about it, but apparently that's possible. There's some stuff out there on the internet. You're welcome to go look for that. So that's one of the big advantages to a coal forge. Super versatile. You can do anything you want in it. One of the disadvantages is they are filthy. The flux in a gas forge creates a problem on the floor of the forge and can be kind of gooey. In a coal forge, it creates clinkers. And clinkers are this nasty stuff that collects at the bottom of the forge. It's all the old welding flux, the impurities in your coal, anything that burns off your material, scale, or when you burn the tip off your fire poker, it goes down in here and becomes clinker. And that's a problem. It's also just filthy. Working in a coal forge, you are going to be covered in coal dust. Your pants are going to be black, your shirt's black. If you're married, your significant other may not let you back in the house without changing clothes first, and you'll probably have to shower as soon as you go in before dinner because you're just a disgusting mess. And coal is also becoming harder to find. Propane is easy to go find. You can go to your local propane dealer. If you're in a rural area, there's somebody that delivers propane, and they might even bring it to you. Sometimes they'll even fill bottles right at your house, but that's getting harder and harder to do. I have a 500-pound tank in the yard that I have filled for propane, but coal I'm not so lucky. And we will talk a little bit more about that at the end when we get into the social economic issues of forges. But that's one of the big disadvantages these days to a coal forge. It's just hard to find good coal. So those are the big things. Coal forges can be side blast, bottom blast like this one is. They can be simple things built out of rock or brick in the ground. They can have blowers, they can have bellows, they can have compressed air inlets, and all of those things are options. But the pros and cons remain about the same. So to sum it up, gas is very convenient. Gas is readily available. Gas is very clean, and it is very suited for production work. Coal, on the other hand, is very versatile. You could coal, charcoal, coke, solid fuel forges. You can do just about anything in one of those forges. The best forge work that has ever been done in the history of mankind was done in solid fuel forges. All of that spectacular ironwork you find in the European cathedrals, all done in solid fuel forges, not in gas. So you can do anything in solid fuel that you want to do, and it's a little bit more difficult in gas. And electric induction, I don't know enough about to tell you what the complete limitations are, but I think it's a lot more limited than a coal forge would be. So now's the part where we talk about some of the social and economic, although I've talked a little bit about economy. Coal is getting more and more expensive, and because coke is made from coal, coke is going to get more and more expensive and more difficult to find. In our area, we have some very high-grade coal, excellent blacksmithing coal, and nobody's mining it anymore. Those mines are all developed for the CF&I steel mill in Pueblo, which is about 30 miles from here. And it's one of the reasons the steel mill was built where it was. Because of the ready access to coal, iron ore, and the Arkansas River for water for cooling. That's why they built that mill there. But they don't burn coal there anymore. They now use electric induction. It's cleaner, it's more efficient for them, and it works for their process just fine. So those coal mines don't have anybody to sell their coal to anymore, so they're all closed. There's not a good high-grade metallurgical coking coal mine that I know of in Colorado anymore. There's still some mines, but they're mining heating coal. And you can use heating coal, you can use anthracite. It's not as good. You won't get the same results. It won't coke as well. It may be more dirty. It's just not necessarily a good idea, and it's worth tracking down good forage coal even if you have to have it shipped. The coal that goes by here on freight trains 2 or 3 times a day, there's enough coal in one of those trains to probably supply every blacksmith in the United States for the next 10 years or more, but it's junk. It is a very low BTU coal. It is very dirty. It's what the power plants want. They don't want that high-grade coal. It will burn out their equipment. They want the lower-grade coal because it doesn't burn so hot. So the coal that's being mined in this area, or coming through, that coal actually comes out of Wyoming, is a cheaper coal. It's just not something I want to burn in the forge. It's not worth my trouble. I value my time and I value my work, and it's not worth my effort to burn that kind of junk, even though you could get some results. If you're making tools, though, I would avoid junky coal because it will have impurities that will make your steel do funky things that you can't predict. And it's very bad for tool steels to have dirty coal. So gas may be a better issue there. Gas is cheaper. Natural gas that's piped into your house, if you can run on that low pressure with a forge designed for that, is probably the most economical way to go right now. Propane is pretty affordable. I spend maybe $600 twice a year to have my propane tank filled, and that would buy a lot of coal, but I don't think I would get as much work done in that dollar amount of coal. Plus it's delivered. Coal I got to go get. Last time I bought a coal, I went to one of the mines that was closing down. It was an all-day trip. It was a fun trip. Enjoyed it. But it takes a full day of my time to go get one pickup truck load of coal. Time before that, we took 2 days to go over to Colorado's western slope because somebody there was having it brought in from back east on rail cars. So we got a ton of coal back there. And again, nice trip, but it took 2 days out of my shop time, and time is money when you're running a business. So coal has its issues, and I think it's on its way out, which is really too bad because it is such a versatile fuel, and I will talk a little bit more about why I like coal in just a few minutes. But I think propane and natural gas are going to push coal out just from practicality and economic points of view. I think that's just the way it's going to have to be. However, charcoal is still a viable option. Charcoal can be made from waste wood, can be made from scrap from construction projects, old pallets. In our area, I have to cut trees for fire mitigation because we live in a wildfire area and it is severely overgrown. They logged this off back in the 70s, and what came back in was brush more so than big trees, and that brush is a real fire danger, but it makes good charcoal. And we will do videos just on charcoal production. So I think for a small scale, charcoal may be both economically and practically a good solution to burning coal, and it will do pretty much everything coal will do. And it has some other advantages, and again, we'll talk about social issues here just real briefly. The electric induction, it uses an incredible amount of power when you're heating, but it doesn't run very much. The heating cycle is relatively short compared to how much of your day you spend doing other things, or you're at the anvil with that hot piece of steel. So I think it's actually fairly affordable to run an electric induction forge. Again, I don't have one, never used one, never been in the same room with one, and I'm looking for my opportunity to get a chance to try one out. So there's practical and economic issues. How about social issues? Well, social issues is really getting along with your neighbors. If you live in a residential neighborhood, and it's typical American suburb, your neighbors probably don't want to smell coal smoke. They probably don't want to see a chimney on your garage, and they don't want to see smoke coming out of the chimney when they're outside barbecuing on a Saturday afternoon and you're in there creating a bunch of green, nasty coal smoke because you screwed up and put too much fresh coal in your fire. So in that environment, propane, again, is pretty nice. They might not even know what you're running a blacksmith shop unless you tell them, or unless they can hear the anvil. The propane forge might keep you out of a lot of trouble with the neighbors in that setting. So propane can be a little bit friendlier. And charcoal, there again, it smells like you're barbecuing. It doesn't smell like a coal forge. So there's charcoal may be another good advantage to keep happy socially with your neighbors. And we'll talk about environmental issues. Not everybody's worried about the environment. People think it's no big deal. And really, as blacksmiths, I think the amount of coal we burn or coke that we burn is such a small drop in the bucket, it's not a big deal. But if you are concerned about environmental issues, then fossil fuels are something you need to think about. Do you want to burn fossil fuels? And unfortunately, that's coal, it's coke, it's propane, it's natural gas. If your electricity to run an induction forge is coming from a coal-fired power plant, you're still burning fossil fuels. So which one pollutes less? Probably either the power plant electricity or the propane natural gas is a little less polluting than coal or coke might be. And remember, the coke has been burned somewhere else. There's something that's, just because it's clean fuel in your shop doesn't mean it was clean wherever it came from. And I'm not sure how that process works to really talk about it, but I know they use it, and the coke is almost a waste product for a lot of industry. So if that's important to you, you have to consider that. That brings us back to charcoal. Charcoal, even though it does put smoke in the air and it does have some particulate emissions and it does put CO2 in the air, it's putting CO2 in the air that is from an active carbon cycle from the trees that have been growing more recently. It's trees that are less than 30 years old, and the trees are going to reabsorb that carbon. Fossil fuels is carbon that was sequestered in the earth and has been out of the active carbon cycle for millions of years until we dug it up and burned it. So one thing, you're just recycling the same carbon over and over again, but with coal, coke, propane, natural gas, you're bringing new carbon into the issue. Again, it's up to you if you want to worry about that stuff. As blacksmiths, I think our impact is very minimal, and it's not really something I'm going to lose sleep over, at least not at the moment. There are other bigger things to worry about. So that's the environmental issue. And earlier you may have heard me say romantic. What are the pros? And I'm not talking about your wife, although if she has an opinion it might get you in hot water if you don't listen to her. I'm talking about when I have been burning coal in my forge, and I walk in the shop the next morning, there's this kind of funky, sour, old, wet coal smell. And I love that smell. That reminds me of my first blacksmithing experiences when I watched Francis Whitaker working in his shop at the Colorado Rocky Mountain School. It reminds me of taking the master class with Dan Nauman. It reminds me of taking classes with Clay Spencer and Ernie Dorrell. It just brings back all those memories, and I just really enjoy my time in the shop when I can have that little bit of coal smell. And that's a real thing. It may seem silly to use that as part of your decision-making process, but I don't do this because it's the fastest way to build things. Forging is not always the best. Oftentimes it may be. I blacksmith because I like it. I want to be a blacksmith. I want to experience the sights, the sounds, the smells, the textures. I want to feel the heat. I want all of that. And smelling the coal smoke or charcoal makes for a more pleasurable day in the shop for me than burning propane. So, something to consider. In the long run, you have to decide for yourself. And there's going to be something that's going to make the decision. Very likely, when you're starting out, it'll be economic because it's the only thing you can get. But a lot of us want that coal forge, or we want that coke forge because that's what the guy that taught us used, or that's what Grandpa had on the farm, or that's what we've seen in all the movies, and that's what we see in our head, and that's really what we want to do. So that's something you have to decide, something you have to consider. In the long run, you can do almost everything you need to do in a propane forge. You just have to think about it, and that may be caused to adapt and use a torch or a MIG welder a little bit more often than if you're working out of a coal forge and have the ability to forge weld at a moment's notice. But if we can go to charcoal or some other solid fuel, maybe feed corn's a good fuel. I don't know. I may have to try that. But lots of different things to consider. This has been a long ramble. I hope it wasn't a rant. I hope I wasn't getting preachy about environmental issues. It's up to you. You decide what forge you need in your shop. Those are just some of my thoughts on the pros and the cons. And it's why I still have both a gas forge, 2 or 3 gas forges actually, I'd have to look around, and a coal forge, and why I would add an electric induction forge if one ever became available, and I would use whatever is appropriate at the time, and that's not a bad way to go either. But if you can just have one, you're going to have to make a decision. Anyways, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for listening to me ramble. I hope you liked the video and can give it a thumbs up. Hope you can subscribe to the channel. Hope you can get out to your shop and make something. Enjoy your time blacksmithing. Have fun. Stay safe. Wear your safety glasses. And we will see you later.